Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind cut low across the dry hills as Naomi Vance stepped down from the stagecoach in the middle of nowhere, boots hitting dust with a finality she could feel in her bones. The town of Coldwater was barely more than a cluster of wooden buildings and a battered sign nailed to a fence post, but it might as well have been the edge of the world. That was what she needed. Distance. Silence. A place where no one asked questions about women who traveled alone with 2 children and a look in their eyes that said they had seen too much. "Come on," she said, her voice steady as she reached back into the coach. 2 small hands took hers. Nellie, just 9, and Nathaniel, 7. Their faces were pale and quiet, eyes flicking nervously to the strangers nearby. She drew them close. "We will be all right here." She hoped that was true. The town watched her like an unfamiliar shadow. A few men tipped their hats. A woman behind the mercantile window narrowed her eyes. Naomi kept her chin up and walked her children toward the small boarding house, her fingers tight around theirs. She did not see the man on the other side of the street until she felt that someone watching her, not with suspicion, but something quieter. Curious. Still. He leaned against the hitching post, tall, broad-shouldered, with a trail-worn coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His horse stood behind him, calm and dust-covered. Their eyes met for just a second before Naomi looked away. Later that afternoon, she found out his name. Yates Ashford, the boarding house owner told her as she handed over the room key. "Drives cattle through here every so often. Keeps to himself. Good man, though. Helped rescue a girl from a flash flood last spring. Nearly died getting her out." Naomi gave a polite nod and took the key. She did not want to know anyone. And she did not want anyone knowing her. But Coldwater was small. By the end of the week, Yates had seen her walking the children to the schoolhouse and back. He had seen her buying beans and flour with careful coins. He had seen her fixing a broken boot heel with shaking hands behind the boarding house steps. And he had not said one word until the day he found Nellie crying alone behind the livery stable. Naomi had been looking for her for over an hour. When she turned the corner, her heart in her throat, she saw Nellie curled on a hay bale and Yates crouched beside her. "Is she yours?" he asked gently, standing as Naomi rushed over. "Yes," Naomi said, pulling Nellie against her. She gets overwhelmed sometimes." Yates gave a simple nod, not pushing. Nellie peeked up at him, then whispered, "Mama gets scared too." Naomi's breath caught. Yates looked at her, and his voice was quiet. "That's so?" Naomi straightened. "Thank you for keeping her safe." "We will be going now." She turned, but he said, "You do not have to be afraid of me." She kept walking. But that night, long after the children had fallen asleep in the small upstairs room, Naomi sat by the window and stared into the dark. The past had carved holes in her. Her husband had not just left, he had left her bleeding, hiding bruises with scarves and lies. Then he had vanished, leaving her and the children to survive off scraps of mercy and the silence of people who looked away. She had run. For years. Changed her name. Changed it again. But there was still a part of her that wanted to believe someone might look at her and not see damage. The next day, Yates was outside the schoolhouse fence, holding the reins to a pony. He tipped his hat when he saw her. "Thought maybe your boy might want to ride. Figured a man should learn early." Naomi blinked. "He is 7. He is brave," Yates said simply. "Saw him stand between his sister and a mule cart yesterday. I think he would like it." Nathaniel's face lit up, but he looked at Naomi first. She hesitated. Then nodded. "Only if you stay close." "I will." So he did. Over the next weeks, it happened like that. Quietly. A box of fresh apples left on their doorstep. A mended boot returned without a word. Yates teaching Nathaniel how to tie a better knot, showing Nellie how to hold the reins. He never asked personal questions. Never came too close. But he was there. One evening, Naomi found him sitting on the edge of the corral, watching the sun fall behind the hills. She had come to thank him for helping fix the schoolhouse roof earlier that day. "I cannot repay you," she said. "You do not need to," he replied. She sat beside him, but not too close. The sky was streaked with orange and gold. The silence between them was not heavy, it was calm. He looked at her. "You do not have to say anything. But if you ever want to talk, I will listen." Naomi stared ahead. Then, softly, "My past is too dark." Yates was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Then let me be your light." She looked at him, startled. "I am not trying to fix you," he said. "I just want to walk beside you. If that is something you can let happen." Naomi's throat tightened. No one had ever said anything like that to her. "I have scars," she whispered. "So do I." Her breath shook, but she stayed beside him. That night, for the first time in years, she did not feel like running. Weeks passed. The town began to accept her. The schoolteacher invited her to help with reading lessons. The blacksmith offered Nathaniel a small job sweeping. Nellie began drawing again. And Yates, he waited. Never pushed. But every evening, he was there. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but his presence. And Naomi began to look for him. One night, as the children slept and the moon rose bright, Naomi stood on the front porch, arms crossed against the chill. Yates rode up slowly and dismounted, his coat dusted in frost. She met him halfway. "I want to tell you," she said. He nodded once. So she told him. About her husband. The bruises. The fear. The escape. The years of hiding. The guilt. The shame. The broken trust. Yates listened, eyes steady. When she finished, she waited for him to step back. He did not. Instead, he reached out gently and took her hand. "You are not broken," he said. "You are surviving. And you are raising two good children. That is strength." Tears filled her eyes. "I do not know how to be loved." "I do," he said. "Let me show you." And for the first time, she let someone hold her. She leaned into him, and his arms came around her, strong and steady. She felt her heart slow. Her breath even out. Her past was dark, but in that moment, she believed there could be light again. She believed it could be him. The spring thaw came slow that year. Snow lingered in the shadows of the hills, and the earth softened into mud beneath wagon wheels and boots. Naomi took in washing to stretch what little coin she had left, her hands raw from scrubbing, but her back no longer curled with fear. She moved with quiet steadiness now, something sturdier than hope, something earned. Yates brought her a chipped tin kettle one morning, left it on the porch beside a wrapped cloth bundle. When she opened it, she found 2 biscuits still warm and a strip of salt pork. No note. Just a gesture. That evening, she found him mending a saddle under the awning beside the livery. The lantern beside him flickered as she approached, her shawl tucked close. "You didn't have to do that," she said, setting the empty cloth back on the bench beside him. "I know," he replied, threading a new stitch through cracked leather. "Didn't seem right, you working all day and not eating proper." She sat on the edge of the bench, minding the slick boards. "I'm not used to kindness without condition." His eyes met hers briefly. "Then let it be new." The lantern light caught the lines beside his eyes, faint, but shaped by more than sun. She wondered what had carved them. "Did you always raise horses?" she asked. He nodded once. "My father bred them near Laramie. I left when I was 19. Took work driving cattle. Learned what I could, where I could." "Why did you leave?" He paused, laying the saddle flat. "He drank. Got mean when he did. I figured one of us had to break the pattern." Naomi felt her breath hitch, but she didn't look away. "Did you ever go back?" "Once. He was already gone by then." She let the silence settle between them. It wasn't heavy, just honest. Yates glanced at her. "You ever think about staying here?" For good? She looked down at her hands, still red from lie. I don't know how to think that far ahead. Well, he said, setting the saddle aside, no one's asking you to. Just seems to me you're already part of this place. Naomi didn't answer, but her gaze lingered on him as she rose. The next morning, Nellie didn't come down for breakfast. Naomi found her curled under the quilts, cheeks flushed, her forehead hot. She sent Nathaniel to the schoolhouse with the neighbor's boy, then wet a cloth and stayed close. Yates knocked just after mid-morning, holding a small jar. Heard from the carpenter's wife your girl's taken ill, he said. This is bitter root and wild mint. Boil it slow, have her sip the steam. Naomi took it with careful hands. You're not from here. How do you know what to use? He shifted his weight. Spent a winter up near the Wind River. A Shoshone woman taught me what plants could ease fever. She looked after her people like a blade in the dark. Naomi stepped back from the door. Would you show me? If I'm to keep them well, I should learn myself. Yates nodded. Tomorrow. I'll bring the horse. We'll ride out past the ridge. Before dawn the next day, Naomi rose and dressed in her thickest skirt, leaving Nellie in the care of the boarding-house matron. Nathaniel was still asleep, his face soft in the blanket's edge. For a moment she stood in the doorway, watching them, then turned. Yates was waiting outside, his horse saddled and a second gelding tied behind. He helped her up without a word and passed her the reins. They rode in silence at first, the rhythm of hooves against thawing ground speaking enough. When they reached a stretch of open land scattered with low cedar and scattered rock, Yates dismounted and motioned her down. This one, he said, crouching beside a spindly plant pushing up through the frost. Yarrow. Stops bleeding, inside and out. Naomi knelt beside him, her skirts brushing the soil. Her fingers hovered above the leaves. How can something so small do so much? He touched the edge of a stem. Some things don't need to be loud to be strong. They moved on, finding golden currant, creeping juniper, and the dry husks of last season's sage. He showed her how to strip bark, how to dry leaves with care. When the sun rose higher, they sat beneath a bluff and shared a crust of bread and a sliver of hard cheese. Naomi watched the wind pull through the grass. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again. Not really. Yates leaned back on his elbows. You don't have to explain that. I think I do, she said softly. You've given so much without asking. And I don't know what it is you want. His gaze held hers. I want to know you. Not just what hurt you. What brings you peace? What makes you laugh? What you look for when the sky's just starting to change. Naomi looked away, not out of shame, but because the truth of it filled her too full to speak. That night, Nellie's fever broke. Naomi sat beside the bed, wiping her daughter's brow with a cool cloth, her heart steady for once. When she stepped out into the hallway, she found Yates waiting by the stairs, hat in hand. She's sleeping, Naomi said. He nodded. I'll go, then. She reached out and touched his arm. Stay, she said. Just for a while. They stood in the quiet together, the lantern flickering low. No promises spoken, no declarations made. But something had shifted between them, as sure and gentle as spring breaking through frost. And neither of them stepped back. A warm rain came through late April, softening the fields and drawing the first green from the bare cottonwoods. Naomi stood at the edge of the boarding-house porch, watching the drops fall in steady rhythm against the eaves. She held a tin cup of tea, cooled and forgotten, in her hand. Behind her, Nellie and Nathaniel sorted through a box of torn books gifted by the schoolteacher, their voices hushed with concentration. The fever had left her daughter thinner, but her color had returned, and her laughter, small and sudden, had begun to surface again. When hoofbeats approached, Naomi didn't flinch. She turned as Yates dismounted, brushing rain from his coat before stepping up beside her. Got called out to the Owens place, he said, glancing toward the hills. One of their maras foaled early. She nodded toward his sleeve. You're bleeding. He looked down and flexed his wrist. Caught a fence nail coming through the gate. Didn't notice till I was halfway back. Come in, she said, already stepping aside. Let me take care of it. Inside, she cleared the small table and sent the children upstairs with strict instructions not to leave their room until supper. She boiled water, laid out a cloth, and opened the small jar of dried plants they'd gathered weeks before. Yates sat still while she cleaned the cut, the lantern throwing light across the worn edge of his jaw. She worked carefully, her fingers steady now with purpose, not fear. You've got a touch like someone used to tending others, he said. I had to learn, she replied, binding the cloth tight. There wasn't anyone else to do it. He studied her, but didn't speak. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just real. Naomi sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. You spoke of the Wind River once. Were you alone up there? He gave a slight nod. I wintered with a man named Red Elk and his niece. They offered me shelter when my horse went lame in the pass. I traded labor for food, helped with trapping and hauling. She taught me how to read tracks. How to listen. Naomi tilted her head. What did you hear? Snow shifting. Trees cracking before they fell. Coyotes calling each other when the sun went. She said everything that lives tells you something, if you're still enough to notice. Naomi let herself meet his gaze. And what do I tell you? His voice was low but clear. That you've been walking through fire and still found a way to carry others. Her breath caught, not from pain, but from the weight of being seen. She looked down at her hands. I've thought about leaving again. Packing what little we have and going somewhere new. Why? He asked, not accusing, just wanting the truth. Because every time something feels safe, I start waiting for it to break. Yates leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then let it hold. Let it be different this time. Not because it's perfect, but because you don't have to face it alone. She shook her head, not in refusal, but in fear. You talk like it's simple. It's not, he said. But it's possible. Outside, the rain slowed. Naomi stood and crossed to the window. The air smelled like wet earth and pine. She could hear Nathaniel's voice drifting faintly from upstairs, reading aloud with halting patience. Nellie giggled. She turned back. If I stay, it can't just be for the children. Or because the town's kind. No, Yates said, rising. It has to be because you want to build something of your own. Naomi stepped toward him. Close enough to see the faint scar beneath his eye. Close enough to feel warmth rise between them. I don't know what kind of life I'd want, she said. But maybe I'd know it when I saw it. Yates reached out, slow and sure, and brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. Then let's find it together. She didn't move. Not away, not forward. But she lifted her chin and let him see her tired, uncertain, but no longer running. I won't be easy, she whispered. I'm not after easy, he said. I'm after true. The rain stopped completely, leaving the room filled with quiet light. Neither of them moved for a long while. But something shifted again, like a gate easing open, not with force, but with choice. And Naomi, strong, scarred, still standing, chose to let him stay. The wind picked up in May, dry and restless, carrying grit across the flats and setting the shutters to tapping against the boarding house walls. Naomi drew the sash tighter around her waist as she stepped onto the porch, a basket of mending under her arm. She had stitched through the morning and into the warm edge of afternoon, her fingers swollen from the thread and her thoughts drifting too far. Yates was due back from the south trail. A rancher had lost 2 head of cattle beyond the ridge, and he'd offered to help. He hadn't said when he'd return. He didn't need to. Naomi had begun to measure time differently now, not by fixed hours, but by the weight of his absence. She settled into the chair near the door, pulled a shirt from the basket, and began to patch the seam above the cuff. The thread pulled clean through the linen, steady and quiet. Footsteps sounded on the boardwalk. She didn't look up until a shadow crossed her lap. I thought I'd miss lunch, Yates said, brushing dust from his coat sleeve. You did, she answered, setting the needle aside. But I saved you a biscuit. It's gone hard, though. Hard's better than nothing, he said, easing down beside her. Took longer than I figured. There was a calf tangled in wire. Had to work it loose slow. She handed him the biscuit wrapped in a cloth, and he broke off a piece with his teeth. Naomi watched him chew, then asked, What made you come to Coldwater the first time? He swallowed, reached for his canteen, and took a long drink before answering. Wasn't a plan. Just the next place on the trail, he said. But when I passed through, I saw a girl pulling her brother away from a runaway wagon. Saw a woman in a faded shawl run after them like her legs were made of iron. She didn't speak. He didn't press her to. I wasn't ready to stop moving, he added. But I remembered the look in her face. Not scared. Just ready to do what needed doing. Naomi turned her hands over in her lap. I've spent so long trying to disappear. I didn't know anyone noticed. I did, he said. They sat for a time, listening to the wind whistle through the gaps in the railings. Nathaniel's laughter echoed faintly from the side yard, where he was helping the blacksmith's boy carry kindling. Naomi leaned back, resting her head against the porch post. Nellie's been asking questions. About her father. Yates kept his eyes forward. What did you say? That he was gone. That he won't be coming back. She folded the cloth back over the mended shirt. She asked if I missed him. I didn't know how to answer. He nodded slowly. Missing something don't always mean you want it back. No. Her voice was low. It just means it left a space. The clouds shifted overhead, casting the yard in gentle shade. Naomi reached for another shirt, but her hands paused over the cloth. She asked if she could call someone else Pa. Yates turned to her then, in full. What did you tell her? I told her only if she wanted to. Only if the man earned it. He looked down, then back at her. And what do you want, Naomi? She searched his face, not for answers. She trusted him not to lie but for steadiness. For something to hold on to in the quiet. I want to stop waiting for the ground to fall out from under me, she said. I want to build something with both hands, and not be afraid of what it costs. Yates didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. I've got a small parcel of land west of town, he said. Nothing grand. Just a patch of grass and a barn with a roof that leaks. Been sleeping there some nights, fixing what I can. She studied him. Why? Because I was hoping you'd come see it. Naomi let her breath out slow. And if I did? I'd ask if you want to plant something. Maybe a few rows of beans. A corner for flowers. A place for the children to run where nothing chases them. And if I said yes? He smiled, quiet and certain. Then I'd start hammering proper windows in before the first frost. She stood, not because she wanted to leave, but because her body needed movement to match what was happening inside her. She walked to the porch rail and looked out over the flats, where the light was beginning to shift toward gold. She turned back to him. I want to see it. Yates rose, brushing the biscuit crumbs from his lap. I'll bring the wagon tomorrow. She nodded. I'll bring the children. There was no need for more. No declarations, no vows. Just the shape of something true, unfolding one shared step at a time. As he walked away, Naomi glanced down at the shirt in her hands. She folded it neatly and placed it back in the basket. The wind blew soft now, brushing the hem of her skirt. She had stopped running. And the light ahead was steady. The wagon creaked over the narrow trail as the prairie opened wide to the west. Naomi sat beside Yates, her children bundled in the back with a folded quilt and a basket of bread wrapped in cloth. The sky had softened into pale blue, and meadowlarks called from fence posts, their songs cutting clean through the quiet. It's just past that rise, Yates said, his voice low but sure, guiding the team with a gentle touch. Naomi nodded, fingers curled around the edge of the seat. She hadn't brought much, only what couldn't be left behind, a few linens, the family Bible, her mother's brooch stitched into the hem of her dress. She'd left the rest behind at the boarding house, tucked into a trunk the matron had promised to keep safe until Naomi decided what to do with it. As they crested the hill, the land rolled out before them open, untamed, with a single barn sitting squat against the slope and a house not more than 3 rooms wide, its planks dulled with age, the roof patched with care. Nathaniel leaned forward over the wagon's edge. "There's a swing in that tree." Yates said, smiling slightly. "Hung it last week." Nellie peered out from under her bonnet. "Did you make it?" "Had some help from a boy at the livery. He held the rope while I climbed." Naomi watched her children clamber down as soon as the wagon stopped, their steps eager, and their hands already tugging at the swing's ropes. She stepped down more slowly, her boots pressing into unfamiliar ground. Yates waited until she came to stand beside him. "I know it's not much," he said, "but it's sound, and the well runs deep. I've cleared space behind the barn for a garden." Naomi turned in a slow circle, taking it in. The porch leaned slightly to the right. One of the shutters hung crooked. But the windows let in light, and the chimney held a curl of smoke from the stove he must have lit before riding to town that morning. She folded her arms. "Where would I sleep?" He pointed toward the house. "The front room's yours and the children's, if that's what you want. I can take the cot in the barn. Or we can build on. I've got enough wood to start framing by summer." Naomi looked at him, the wind tugging strands of her hair loose from her braid. "I'm not here because I need a roof," she said. "I'm here because I want to be." Yates didn't answer. He just took off his hat, held it in one hand, and reached for her with the other. She stepped into his arms. It wasn't the kind of embrace that asked or questioned. It was the kind that settled, that steadied. She felt the ridge of his shoulder beneath her cheek, the slow thud of his heart under her palm. Behind them, laughter rang off the trees. They spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking what little they'd brought. Yates showed Nathaniel where to stack the kindling beside the stove, and Naomi laid linens over the small pine frame bed she and Yates had carried in weeks before. Nellie found a chipped tin cup in the cupboard and filled it with wildflowers, arranging them on the sill without a word. That evening, they ate on the porch. Bread, apples, and a pot of beans warmed over the fire. Yates passed the cup to Naomi before settling beside her on the steps. "I never meant to stay in one place," he said. "But then you came here, and nothing's felt right anywhere else since." Naomi didn't look at him, but she reached for his hand. "I don't want promises," she said. "I want a life. Something we shape together." He turned his hand in hers and linked their fingers. "Then we'll shape it." Summer came in slow, golden waves. The garden took to the soybeans, squash, a row of corn that Nathaniel watered every morning before breakfast. Naomi found a rhythm in tending the land, in kneading bread with Nellie at her side, in listening to the wind through the grass at dusk while Yates whittled by the steps. They married beneath the cottonwood tree that shaded the swing. Just the 4 of them, and the preacher who'd ridden from town with a Bible under one arm and a smile that reached his eyes. Naomi wore no veil, only a clean dress and a ribbon Nellie tied into her braid. Yates placed a brass ring on her finger, simple and steady. Afterward, they shared a meal at the table Yates had built from reclaimed boards, the same table where Naomi would later teach Nellie her letters and Nathaniel would carve his initials when he thought no one was looking. They built slowly. A new room added before the first snow. A fence repaired board by board. A cradle carved for the child they welcomed 2 winters later, small and strong, with Yates's eyes and Naomi's quiet determination. The past never left completely. Sometimes it came back in Naomi's dreams, or in the way she startled at a slammed door. But Yates never asked her to forget, only to let him hold her when it came. And she did. Love, for them, was not sudden or sharp. It was steady. It was in the way he warmed her tea before she rose. In the way she mended his shirts before he asked. In the way the children began to call him Pa, without needing to ask if it was all right. Years passed. The garden grew. The swing weathered but held strong. And on evenings when the sky turned soft and the house was quiet, Naomi would step onto the porch and find Yates already there, waiting, the space beside him always kept open. They had made something together. Not perfect, but real. And it held.